What qualities do you need to develop to approach life with an open heart? That's what the 6 lines of the SQ tell us. And what I mean by approaching life with an open heart is essentially to have a spirit of innocence and trust, and to believe in the adventure of your life and the world, and to know that people and things are put in your path so that you can grow. And what we have in the parentheses here is what we needed as a child to develop that optimistic outlook or worldview that I just mentioned. What's bolded is the keynote, what we can focus on in our lives today to foster that open-hearted connection. And the SQ dictates our mythology. And the only way that I know to believe in the story that I just told you is to see life from a mythic perspective. And that just means taking a step back, not getting lost in the day-to-day of your life and believing that the next thing that happens to you is the most important thing. We have to give ourselves some space to come into that worldview. SQ is unconscious, just like the radiance is in your activation sequence. And so in activation, we focus on our life's work and our evolution, and then that allows the gift of our radiance to shine through. In the Venus work, it's focusing on your IQ and your EQ, so your intellectual picture of the world and your emotional framing of the world. When we get those to a higher frequency, then the gift and the city of our SQ can start to shine through. Pair that then with these 6 qualities, and that's how we can nurture our heart to open even more and come into a place where we can give and receive love in the world. So first line is about certainty. And we all enter the world with a sense that something is not quite right. And honestly, it comes because before we were born, we were whole. We were connected to our mother. We were in this place of purity, of unity. And then we are born and we come out and immediately we're separate. We feel alone. And we want to know why we're here and what we're here to do. And we need to understand those answers, and first lines feel that the deepest. But what we have to realize is that security, that level of certainty, can't come from anything that you're doing externally in the world. It has to come from inside you. You have to be able to fill that hole. And so children, all children, and remember, just because you're one of these lines, that just means that one is a little more prominent for you, but all of them are going to show up and are important to you. So all children need rhythm. Nature moves in rhythm, and we are nature. So we have to understand the sunrise and the sunset and the cycles of 7 years and the seasons. All of these things affect how we show up in the world. And we have to contemplate how we can pair ourselves or combine ourselves with that rhythm instead of fighting against it. As first lines, it's important to contemplate the routine you had as a child. Did you have a steady rhythm, or was it chaotic with things all over the place? Did you feel safe or unsafe? And there's no reason to blame anyone. No matter what your line, everyone is doing their best, and it's all mythology. It's all part of our story. And that's not to negate everyone's suffering, but it is to say we can't go back, and you got what you got. So there's no point in blaming anyone. We just continue to do what we can do. Your need for certainty can come from a place of fear. So as first lines, it's important, are you constantly looking for protection? Do you feel like you need a giant security system at your house? Do you have a million guns to make you feel safe? That is fear driving the need for certainty. And we tend to create false beliefs that make us feel more certain. So we tell stories about ourselves and about our lives that are consistent, but not necessarily true. And that totally limits our ability to create, to make things, because creativity comes from the unknown. And if you'd rather feel certain and safe than being comfortable in the not knowing, then you're always going to be stuck where you are. You'll have a tendency as a first line to become a victim of the drudgery of doing something that maybe you don't want to be doing because it gives you this level of security. The other big piece here is sometimes you'll seek security from somebody else in your life. So you feeling insecure, you put that onto your partner and you need them to fulfill certain things in you. And that is impossible. Again, it can only come from within yourself, only in your heart. Remember that rhythm, although it's important, constantly changes, which means routine is going to change. We've got to learn how to flow with the seasons. You've got to embrace the flow, embrace the changes in tempo, and that's what's going to allow you to transform as a first line. Moving on to the second line now, it's freedom, and the need was wildness and boundaries. So part of your mythology is returning home, returning back to wholeness. So we talked about how we feel separate when we feel born, and our mythology returns us back to wholeness. So think about like the Hobbit returning to the Shire, or the beast turning back into a man at the end of Beauty and the Beast. Our myths are clues to what we need to do, and it's important to pay attention to them. So for twos, your home is freedom. And the gene key that you have in this sphere is what is going to make you feel the most free. It's what you need most to feel free. And as a child, you needed to explore. You needed to get outside. You needed to test out different things, and you needed boundaries. So reflect back on where your upbringing was. Was it too structured, too tight, and you couldn't go around and explore your environment and yourself? Or was it the opposite? Was it just the Wild West with no boundaries? Both of those are going to have ramifications later on down the line. For example, without boundaries, while you're young, you're probably lacking direction in your life right now. Or there could be a counter reaction to that where you felt lost, you felt like you didn't have any boundaries, and so now you over boundary. You need like these very specific rails, or else you feel like you're gonna drift off into Never Land, just like when you were a kid. So the boundary carries over to other areas of your life also. So you'll notice this in your relationships. Think about how it shows up there, how you have boundaries that you expect your partner not to cross, but maybe don't come back on you. Maybe you are resentful that your partner is a boundary at all. This is like the deep work for a second line. And there's a big paradox here, which is second lines are wired for freedom and at the same time for one-to-one relationships. So if you remember, the keynote for the sphere of radiance for the second line is marriage. And so it takes a lot of work to understand how to marry that paradox, how to be wild and also to be in relationship with another person. And just like with the first line, certainty coming from within, well, the second line needs to understand that freedom also comes with it from within. It's not about being stuck somewhere or being what you perceive as locked into a relationship. Regardless of what's happening externally, you always have access to that freedom. Love is not dependent on external conditions. So you need the banks of the river. You need the structure, because that's what allows your wildness to come out into the world. And without it, you'd be completely directionless. Third line is pleasure, and the need was adventure and understanding. So this is the pleasure of life, not pleasure distracting yourself from life. So I have the 56th gene key 2 different times, once in my radiance and once as my core. And the shadow there is distraction, the gift is enrichment, and the city is intoxication. And that's what came to mind here is a lot of times we can use pleasure as a distraction instead of just being in the pleasure of any given moment. And that's what this pleasure is talking about here. So as a third line, you're adventurous, you're changeable, you're an explorer, you're an experimenter. And to draw pleasure from life, you need to be like a child. You need to bring back that innocence. You need to be willing to try a million different things. If you've ever heard of a growth mindset, it's about constantly learning new things, knowing that you're going to be bad at them, knowing that some of them are going to go wrong, and doing that thing anyway. You know as a third line that life is a celebration. And yes, there is suffering in this world. Nonetheless, if there was no life, there would be nothing, suffering or joy. And so it is a celebration. We give the message to children directly or indirectly through saying it to them or through how we act that life is a struggle. Most people, right? That's the collective world right now, is talking about work as being hard and that you need to buckle down and bust your butt, and in 50 years maybe you'll be able to enjoy what the world has on offer. And this leads to the opposite worldview that I talked about when I opened up. This leads to a closing down of the heart. And oftentimes we don't even notice that that worldview is there. It gets so deep into our consciousness that it's just, we think it's just how the world is. But it's just this deep pessimism that can be turned around. And the way that you turn it around as a third line is to go and play, to reawaken the child in you, to find your innocence. And I know that as a third line, your life was probably messy and you probably have maybe some regret or maybe some shame or some guilt. And we gotta start to put those burdens down so that you can dust yourself off and get back to engaging with life in a way that makes you feel alive. It's time to forgive yourself. It's time to remember. 3s are the true ecstatics in this world. The artists, the poets, the writers, the polymaths. They're here to eke every bit of joy from life that can possibly come out of it. And that's really what matters. And it's your job as a third line to learn what really matters, to remember what really matters. You love life, and life is made of people, and therefore you love people. And sometimes third lines don't believe that. At some point they got hurt so heavily through their experimentation along the way that the last thing they want is people in their lives. But you're here to learn understanding. And it's your experimentation that gives you so many different worldviews, which allows you to understand so many different people. And that's your gift as a third line. The 4th line is about belonging, and you needed kinship and community. So in the Venus sequence book, which is the same as the text from the course, which at the very least, I encourage you to get the book. The Venus sequence is tough work, and having that as a companion is important. But what it says for the 4th line is, if you lived a full life as a 4, your funeral will be attended by thousands of people. And that's not because of the stuff that you accomplished in your life. It's because of you. Children live in trust, and that is an open-hearted 4th line. It's all about trust. It's all about not a naive trust. It's having the courage to trust other people, and other people see that. They know that you don't have to offer that to them, and it lights them up, and it brings out the best in them because you went first and you trusted them. Fours are going to seek a home in community, whether that's conscious or unconscious. And this could be community any way. This could be a gang. It could be part of a small business. It could be at a religious group. But it's going to be super important to align fours. And it's something to watch out for as a fourth line, because you might plug yourself into something that isn't the best for you, but gives you a sense of community. So modern families, the nuclear family, can be hard for a fourth line because they need community, and we're locked into this 4-person, 3-person, 5-person, even 8-person group if you've got a big family, but that's still not enough. This is tribal living, is what makes fours feel great. And to be successful in the world, you need lots of different people to interact with. And so if you've ever read like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, that kind of stuff just comes naturally to a fourth line. They're going to have lots of influence over people. In fact, in the sphere of vocation, the fourth line is keynoted sales. And don't think that's literal. You're not literally selling stuff, but you're able to connect with people on a deep level, to express something to them, to get a point of view across, or sometimes a product across as well. Your need to belong can undermine your relationships. So that's something to be aware of. You want everyone to like you. You want everyone to love you. You want your partner to include you or to make you feel like you belong all the time, regardless of their feelings. So in relationships, knowing that not everyone feels the way that you feel, and trusting that the other person isn't casting you out, they just have a disagreement with you in that moment. Belonging comes from having an open heart. It's inside of you. You feeling at home makes other people feel at home. And that's your gift as a fourth line. And that's how you can be the creator of community. The fifth line is mentoring. And what you needed was role models with integrity. So this is my line in this sphere. And fifth lines are all about power. And as a fifth line SQ, you have the ability to spread the highest frequencies the farthest. You're like a beacon for other people to look at and to see what's possible. So it's your job to model love over fear as a fifth line SQ. And you need to contemplate how you might show the world how to live with an open heart. Your fifth line SQ drives awe in people, but this awe is a lot of times fifth lines, yours truly, take that to their ego. They get like puffed up, inflated by the awe that other people have. And instead, the awe isn't even really about you. It's about this connectedness that you model. It's about people feeling that there's something beyond you. And so that's something to watch out for as a fifth line is it's not about you. And you don't have the power. It's what's coming through you. And your job as a fifth line is to make the metaphysical, the esoteric practical. You're here to pull love into the world, to make it real for people, to make it something tangible. And in your childhood, you needed role models. And at first, that was real people. So your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your uncles, your grandparents. But you needed people in your life to model this. Then as you get a little bit older and your emotional system, your intellectual systems develop, then we can start to put that out into different archetypes. So be that a superhero or a sports figure. But in the beginning, SQ is very physical. It's about touch. It's about being in the same place as people. And so your primary role is to be the role model that you got or that you didn't get for other people. You need to be somebody who cares, because our role models, our mythology is what programs how we see what our outlook is on the world. And so it's your job to help people see that there is another way than the running around like a chicken with your head cut off, like a pessimism that you have to work hard and maybe things will work out for you, but probably not. 5s get to choose. Are you going to go on a journey of love, or are you going to go on a journey of power? And I chose power. And I spent the first almost 40 years of my life trying to fill the hole that I didn't get, trying to make myself feel powerful because I wasn't cared for when I was a kid. And I can tell you that it leads to destruction, ultimately, which again is part of the journey. And that's the beauty of these lines, is they give you space. They allow you to see, they allow me to see that I needed that as part of my path so that I could come to a place where I can begin to open my heart. So if you choose the journey of power, you are constantly going to feel like you're not getting what you deserve. You're not getting enough. And the quest for wealth or fame stamps out literally everything else in your life. I didn't give a crap about my family. I didn't care about my friends. I didn't care about my body. I didn't care about my spirit. The only thing I cared about was developing wealth and fame. And the journey, the interesting thing is the journey of love also gives us those things, or can give us those things. You can be so powerful with an open heart. In fact, more powerful. But instead of using that power to serve yourself and your own agenda, you use it to serve the rest of the world. So your job at the 5th line is to radiate love and wisdom and to spread goodwill in the world and to be the example for other people. Finally, we come to the 6th line, which is about patience, and you needed time and space. So 6 lines are always the most mysterious, the most hidden. They're like an iceberg in that you can see just the very edge of what they're trying to convey, but underneath the surface where nobody can see, that's where the bulk of what they're carrying is. And what they're carrying is a new vision, a new way of seeing the world, and it's always ahead of its time. Especially now, the collective is very much in the shadow. And the thing that the 6th line is carrying is going to drive us up and out of that. But because so many people are stuck there now, it can seem outlandish or far away or impossible even to come into the world. But they are here to show us a new potential future and to help us understand that there is a universal context to things. All of the other 5 lines need this 6th line to remind them of what really matters in the world. And you might develop as a 6th line at a different pace than your peers, especially when you were younger. You might have some needs that other people don't have. You might have an unusual character. Those are all really normal or common things for a 6th line. And ultimately, it's because you are different than all of the other 5 lines. And what you needed was a sense of patience and trust from your parents, because you needed time to explore. You needed time to feel what's down there, what you can't see. And that's really hard for parents to give these days, because if you don't follow these specific timelines, you're falling behind and oh no. And that is hard for a 6th line because they are in no hurry. This is a long path and they know that deep down. One day a transmission is going to come through the 6th line SQ. And all it needs is time and space. If it's rushed or if it's pressured, you're not going to have what you need to make through the transition that you need to go through in order to bring that thing out into the world. And that makes it really easy for you as a sixth line to give up or compromise on your dream. But no matter what happens, you'll always have that ember of a dream deep inside of you. You're never going to be able to get it to go away. And so you just have to keep the hope. You have to know that this thing is going to come out of you with enough time and with enough space. And you don't know how to make it real. And you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to think about how to make it real. But remember, everything in rhythm. It will come when it's time for it to come. Your only job as a sixth line is not to give in to the collective shadow, to hold that thing deeply, to know that eventually it's going to come out, because your only failure is giving up. You can do a million things, quote unquote, wrong, and that's okay. In fact, that's probably part of your journey, but you can't stop. And there will probably be times that you do, but it'll still be burning. And you just have to remind yourself to come back to it. You don't have to understand. You just have to allow it to come through, to bubble up in you. So those are the 6 lines of the SQ. I'm going to bounce around for the Venus sequence. Obviously, I didn't start at the beginning or the end of the Venus sequence, and I'm not sure where I'm going to go from here. But this is deep work. This is hard work. This is... takes time to contemplate and to sit with these things. So I encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.